Simpia spoke to NPA boss Shaun Abrahams at the end of the media briefing. He began by asking him to explain why he went to great lengths to criticize the media in its reporting on the so-called SARS rogue unit.
I was deeply disturbed about the way this matter has been ventilated in the public sphere. It certainly affected the morale of the majority of the citizenry of this country. The negative effect, the continuous comments in the media around this matter had on the economy of the country and also from a social perspective. As head of this institution, saddled with the ultimate constitutional responsibility to decide who should be prosecuted and who not, I felt it was absolutely appropriate to take the public into my confidence and to clear the air around the issue, to eliminate any future possibility of speculation.
And what's the status of that investigation? We do understand that you've confirmed also last week as well that there was a docket that came from the Hawks and you sent it back to the Hawks with guidance.
As you would have heard from my address earlier on, the role of a prosecutor in giving guidance is not just a once-off affair. There's a relationship. It's a toing and froing, and of course, at times instructions or direction is given. I cannot comment at what stage the investigation is, but I do call upon the public to be respectful of the institutions concerned and to allow the processes to be concluded. We will then, of course, certainly take the country into our confidence once the investigation has been concluded as to what the decision is or will be in respect of the matter. But I can give my assurance that no charges will be preferred against any person, nor will any person be the subject of arrest.
And one of those persons would obviously be the minister.
Well, that's, of course, the public has ventilated the issue around the minister, and that's why I felt it absolutely appropriate to take the public into my confidence, because the minister is the Minister of Finance, and the public was deeply concerned, around rumours of his imminent arrest, and I had to clear the air.
You also confirmed earlier on during the press briefing that the minister isn't facing any charges of espionage. Is he facing any other charges besides what has been publicized or what has been in the media?
The minister is certainly not facing any charges of espionage. I cannot comment on whether the minister faces any other charges. That determination I would probably only be able to make, once the investigation has been concluded. And I don't know if the minister is a suspect in this matter, so I can't comment on that. And it would be inappropriate for me to comment and say who the suspects are, and what charges are being investigated against them. This is currently a matter that's being dealt with between, members of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit and members of the Hawks.
So if you then find it upon yourself or feel that it's compelling to come out here and clear the air around the charges or alleged charges that the minister was facing, why can't you come out and say whether the minister is a suspect or whether or not he's a suspect in this matter?
I think it's inappropriate to say whether anybody is a suspect in an investigation that's being conducted by the DPCI. You must remember, investigations are the domain of the South African Police Services. In this case, it's the Hawks. It will be improper until the investigation has reached a stage, where a person is approached to comment, on the matter, whether they have to answer, any questions as a result of the available evidence. I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on who the suspects are. It's just not fair. It's not fair to the person. It's not fair to the investigation. It's not fair to the proper administration of justice. And I think the media must take responsibility for this. The media wants to ventilate this issue out in the court, of public opinion. And I think it's wrong. They must respect the institutions concerned that are saddled with the responsibilities of conducting investigations.
Does this then not prolong speculation? And we've seen how the markets react to any story where the minister is involved.
But who said the minister is involved? The media has speculated and said the minister is involved. So that's why I keep insistingly saying the media must take full responsibility. If the media is not satisfied that the DPCI is conducting an investigation and that the DPCI will announce at the appropriate time how far their investigation has gone, or the matter submitted to the National Prosecuting Authority and decisions are made, I think it's inappropriate for the media to speculate. And the media have contributed largely to the current economic crisis the country finds itself in. So the media must take responsibility. And the media seems not to wanting to take responsibility. So too must certain politicians. So too must certain economists. So too must certain legal commentators. They must all take responsibility.
Have you been in discussions with the minister? Has he called you, perhaps?
The minister has not called me. The minister's lawyers have written a letter to my office. I have submitted the letter to the head of the Priority Crimes Litigation Unit. It's an acting special director who has crafted an appropriate response to the minister, and I'm sure the minister would have received the letter by now, or at the very least, the minister's lawyers would have received a response to the letter.
Was this a letter seeking clarity around the investigation, or whether the minister will be part of those who will probably eventually be prosecuted? Because the assumption is that when the Hawks bring a docket to the NPA, they are of the conviction that these are the suspects and we believe that they're guilty. But of course, the decision to prosecute lies with the NPA.
Well, that's of course correct, and that's why there'll always be toing and froing, when it comes to giving guidance in respect of investigations, because the NPA may look at a docket and say, we are not in a position to make a decision in respect of this matter. In this affidavit, the following is referred to, and then the prosecuting authority may want to seek further clarity on it. They may want to seek further clarity on documentation or other evidence that's relevant to making a decision. You must remember, and I stipulated this earlier in my address, when this engagement between the prosecuting authority and the Hawks takes place, or between the prosecuting authority and any other structure of the South African police services, it's ultimately to determine whether there is relevant and admissible evidence, whether it is in the interest of justice to prosecute in respect of the matter. When this engagement takes place, it's ultimately to determine. Remember this: you must take into consideration what is in favor of the accused or suspect, and what is not in favor of the accused or suspect. In other words, evidence that's to the advantage and or disadvantage of a suspect. So it's not a matter of a situation where an investigation is being driven in a particular direction, or an investigation is being targeted towards certain individuals. I certainly, under my watch, will not allow any investigation to be targeted against any specific or particular individual or individuals. I've spoken about that since my inception. I'm against tunnel-visioned investigations. We must look at the broader scope of things. We must look at the broader picture, and ultimately, we must do what's best for the proper administration of justice.
Advocate Abrahams, I'm going to try and push the envelope on this one, or should I say try and open the envelope.
I wish you
could. The contents of that email or the letter that you got from the minister's lawyers, would you be able to share some of that with us?
I think it's inappropriate for me to do so. If the minister or the minister's lawyers deem it necessary to engage the media, I don't operate in that manner. So I'm certainly not going to discuss that. So if they want to engage the media on it, it's their liberty to do so. We don't work like that.
Okay, the main reason why we're actually here today was, of course, for that announcement whether the NPA will appeal that ruling from the full bench of the North Gauteng High Court. And you said that you have instructed the State Attorney to do exactly that. And you've mentioned 6 grounds that you would be appealing this High Court ruling on. Can you just take us through some of those?
I think, of course, it will be. We have filed the papers earlier today. And of course it's a fairly voluminous document, and for me to elaborate on all the grounds will be a fairly lengthy exercise. We do, of course, respectfully make the point that the full bench erred in a number of respects, and I think you'll have to look at the papers and take the extracts from the papers from our application, how we ventilate the points that we take on appeal. I think that would be the appropriate way to do things.
But one of those are, of course, the separation of powers, which is something that you've mentioned here as well during this press briefing.
Absolutely, that's quite correct. We are of the view that the decision of the full bench of the High Court gravely affects the discretionary powers of prosecutors on a daily basis. You of course know that inherently prosecutors have immense discretionary powers, and we have the view that this judgment limits prosecutorial discretion and prosecutorial powers. Prosecutors decide on a regular basis, on a daily basis. They decide on the admissibility of evidence, whether processes were regular or irregular, and whether the interest of the administration of justice best dictates that these matters must go to court. In effect, what this judgment says is that prosecutors shouldn't decide that. Those matters must be taken to court. They must be ventilated in court. A court must decide. We disagree with that completely, and we feel that it impedes the constitutional powers of the National Prosecuting Authority. Similarly, the court had directed that President Zuma must face the charges as per the indictment which was previously served on him. No court can order the prosecuting authority to institute a prosecution. We felt the court, with the greatest of respect, went a bit too far.
And that decision taken by Mkoterimse at the time, 2009, and I'm going to ask this again, is it still your conviction that President Jacob Zuma would not receive a fair trial if the charges against him are reinstated?
I started off by saying that I consulted with senior members of the NPA, the leadership of the NPA. I consulted with senior counsel on the matter. We've, of course, decided, to appeal on a number of different reasons. And we feel the conduct of the prosecutor concerned at the time was of such an egregious nature, and that there was a nexus between his conduct, and the ultimate, of course, serving of the indictment. Sight must not be lost that Mr. McCarthy is the person that issued the Section 28 certificate. He was head of the DSO. At the time, he was a Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions. He was in charge of both the investigative and prosecuting teams, because he headed the Directorate of Special Operations, at the time. Similarly, his conduct in the Browsmo report, which was ventilated, in the matter, all that needs to be taken into consideration, at the end of the day. And we respectfully of the view that, the court erred in that regard. And we feel that an appeal court will definitely come to a different decision.
So you will not get into whether President Jacob Zuma will get a fair trial or not?
No, I'm not going to get into that.
The High Court ruling today, the Western Cape High Court ruling, of course, on a case also brought by the DA against one of your deputies, Nomnobo. Of course, that case has now been dismissed. Just quick reaction from your office?
I'm absolutely pleased at the result, from the ruling of the Cape High Court. At the same time, the matter arose at a time, soon after I'd taken office, the National Prosecuting Authority found itself with the lowest morale. It's a pity, and it's rather regrettable that some of the issues ventilated in that matter had to be ventilated, in a court of law. Preferably, I would have not wanted us to ventilate those matters in a court of law, but they have been ventilated. The Cape High Court has made a ruling, and we're pleased with the ruling. Of course, I'd like to study the judgment and look at the reasoning of the court in that regard before I make a proper comment in respect of the matter.
We know, of course, of all the judgments or mentions where Ms. Ngcuka has been mentioned in various court judgments as well, where there's been aspersions cast on a character as well, in public as well. And one of the issues that the NPA raised during the case of President Jacob Zuma, whether or not to reinstate the charges, was the issue around the public having confidence in the NPA, that the NPA will act without prejudice, the NPA will act with no fear nor favor. Why is it then in this case, don't you think that having Ngcuka being part of the NPA while facing all these allegations, that it would not cast aspersions then on the character of the NPA?
I think we must look at the history, of the NPA, and we must also look at the political climate we find ourselves in as a nation, and the political climate that we come from. The public should have every confidence in the National Prosecuting Authority. I can assure the public that there's no political interference or any other interference in the National Prosecuting Authority or the work of the National Prosecuting Authority. Hopefully, the judgment of the Cape High Court would vindicate the President's decision not to have suspended Advocate Jiba and not to have conducted an inquiry into a fitness to hold office. I have confidence. In Advocate Jiba. You've only asked me about Advocate Jiba, so I'm only responding to you in respect of Advocate Jiba. She's done. She's a valuable member of the NPA, and she works considerably hard, and she's well respected by her peers, and she does make a very positive contribution in taking the NPA forward. And hopefully she has been vindicated and the President's been vindicated. This is not personal for me. Nothing will ever be personal for me. I will always do what's in the best interest of the NPA and in the best interest of the citizenry, of this country.
Is that one of the reasons why you decided to drop the perjury charges against instituted by a predecessor?
Well, you of course know that I was not the person, who made the decision, to drop the charges against Advocate Jiba. The person who made that decision is Advocate Marshal Mokhatle, the regional head of the SCCU. He is the person that made the decision. And people consistently, keep on saying, National Director Shaun Abrahams, Advocate Abrahams, you dropped the charges. I did not drop the charges. The decision was made by Advocate Marshal Mokhatle.
And it's a decision that you supported?
I did support it.